Hello and welcome back to this video series about hymn playing tips for virtual services. Tip number 3 is actually multifaceted. So the first part is pick familiar hymns for your congregation. I know that sounds a little bit straightforward, but it may not be as easy as you think. If you have been with your church for many years, then you probably intuitively know which hymns are well known, well liked, disliked, totally unknown. But if you've only been there a little while, or you're brand new, or if the congregation is constantly growing and changing, then you may not have as good a grasp on it as you could. A couple ways to find out which hymns are familiar to your congregation is, number one, to see if there's a spreadsheet somewhere. Some musicians, former musicians at the church, might have kept up with which hymns were sung and you could reach out to them. Or maybe the pastor has kept up with that. So maybe your pastor or former musician was really well organized and you can just take their work and use that. If not, then you could go back and look at bulletins, if there are bulletins available from the past, printed ones or online. Another thing that might be a little bit easier and a little more fun, especially since we're not all getting together to sing right now, is to actually invite some of your choir members to the church, just a few so that you can remain socially distanced. But invite choir members who have been a part of the church for a really long time, if possible, and who are likely to really know what is familiar and what's not. If they say that a hymn is familiar or not familiar, most likely that reflects on the congregation as well. Plan a couple months of hymns ahead. Then just play the first couple phrases of each hymn. Just get the reaction, okay? Do they say, oh yeah, we know that one, or I'm not so sure? And if they have a real positive reaction to the tune, then you go, check, that one's familiar. If they're like, I'm not so sure, or I've never heard that one, then you can make an appropriate mark on your hymnal. Now, this doesn't mean that you cannot introduce new hymns to your congregation. I'm all about introducing new hymns. You totally should. And just keep them to a minimum and perhaps introduce them as vocal solos or organ solos while you're doing these virtual services. Now, the second part of the tip is to reduce the number of verses if necessary. So many fantastic hymns do have 5, 6, or more verses. And for a congregation in a sanctuary, that's already pushing it for most people's attention spans. But in a virtual service where people have distractions, like I said before, and they're not wanting to sing maybe robustly because they're a little bit self-conscious, well, probably 2 or 3, maybe 4 verses is as many as you can get away with before people are drifting out. Something you have to be careful with is not compromising the poetic intent or the theology of the hymn, right? Now, I feel a little more comfortable telling you to excise verses on super familiar hymns because it's likely that in the past the congregation has sung all of those verses. They have absorbed the full poetry, the full theology of that hymn at some point. And so, if you remove a few verses for your virtual service, then not too much is lost, hopefully. Do pay attention, though, to which verses you're taking out and make sure that, does the context of the hymn remain? Does the statement of the hymn remain? And so forth. Pick familiar hymns for your congregation and reduce number of verses to 2 or 3 if need be. I hope you'll come back for the next couple tips. And until then, have a good day. Bye.